Hey guys, today I wanted to try something a little different. Um, I'm practicing sharing stories that are more from my heart and from my own life experience. I mean, I am a clairvoyant coach for leaders and entrepreneurs, but I'm also a human being and I learn life lessons every day myself. So today, one of the great lessons or reminders that I had was the idea of never underestimate our capacity for change. And because a lot of us have this strange idea that we can only grow so much or we can only do so much of this one thing, that we can't really transform in a dramatic fashion that's for other people, or it just doesn't happen. But the truth is that all of us are capable of really dramatic change, and all of us are capable of doing things that right now seem impossible or seem really far away. And my father called me today, and this reminded me of it because when my father called, and he actually called for kind of a personal reason, because my cat died last night. Yeah, that's heartbreaking. But my parents have been taking care of it. It was an old cat and lived many happy years, and my parents were taking care of it because it fell in love with their cat. That's another long story. But the thing that my father reminded me of, because we started talking about fear and we started talking about doing new things, and I started talking about how I might be looking at moving again, and and all the fears that come up around that, and like doing new things in general. I'm thinking about starting a workshop, and that's creating all kinds of fears for me. And so it's an interesting thing that happens, but he reminded me of a workshop that he and I took together like many, many years ago. And it was with, I believe, with The Art of Living with Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. I don't know if you know him, but anyway, it was a very intensive Kundalini type workshop where I was amazed. My father invited me, so that was kind of wonderful, and that's a long story in itself. But we ended up doing this 4-day workshop that was really, really transformative and intense. And we had to do all these things to sort of get uncomfortable and face our fears. And I remember there were things like I had to walk into a store and get down on my knees and ask a guy to marry me. And I did, and there was just but there was other things like I had to get up and share a story in front of all these people I didn't know and dance and sing. We had to stand face to face with people and look them in the eyes and sort of share something personal. So there were all these incredible, challenging experiences that happened. And really, it was actually an amazing, transformative thing. But when he reminded me that today, it hit me on two levels, at least two levels. One of them was, holy shit, yes, I did those things. And I've done crazy things like that many times. I've actually, I started a children's charity with no idea what I was doing. That was terrifying. I started teaching college with no idea what to do. That was terrifying. But it's so funny because every time that we get back into that place of having to do something new, it still feels like you can't step up to that. You can't change. You can't become that, right? It just seems impossible. And yet that's a lie. It's a really big, fat lie, because we've all done it. And I personally have done it many, many times. And I can tell you that the fear is the same every single time. So that was the one level. So I was reminded of that. So I was really grateful to him for that. But the other thing is a much more personal, deeper, somewhat serious level, in that my father and I for many years did not have a relationship. We weren't close because when I was a child, my father had borderline personality disorder, and he was basically a narcissist and a very, dysfunctional and somewhat abusive narcissist at that. So that mental illness that he had caused him to behave in certain ways, and they were extremely difficult to grow up around. And I had to spend many, many years processing and healing from the stuff that happened. But the amazing thing is that even though I had those years where we were estranged or we fought or we he ended up eventually getting into therapy, like really late in his life. I think it was in his late 60s or early 70s, maybe it was late 60s. I'm not sure. I have to think about this, but I think it was 70s. And he really massively transformed from someone who couldn't care about other people's feelings on some level and who was always fighting and arguing and just could never listen, to someone who actually showed empathy, someone who can listen, someone who cares, someone who I really enjoy hanging out with and talking to. And, you know, he's like, in many respects, a different man. And that came from just making a decision for him and moving forward. He took a meditation program at a hospital that was like 10 weeks long or something. And then he went and did this art of living stuff for a while on his own. And he was also seeing a therapist, psychiatrist, 2 different therapists, I think, for a while. Like, he really got into it. And that making that decision and committing to it really transformed his life and transformed who he was. And by effect, he changed all of our lives. So by transforming himself and going to these things, he transformed my mother's life in many ways. He transformed my life, my brother's life, and the lives of all the people that he's now friends with. He's now, you know, a person who has friends and a person who, you know, not that he didn't always have some friends, but like, I'm just saying, he's a totally different person in many ways. And just that has had a ripple effect. So this is really a story, though, today for me about realizing and remembering when the fear comes in of like imagining yourself doing this new thing as this new person. You think, oh, that's not for me, whether it's speaking on stages or writing a book or whatever, switching careers or becoming an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur, starting a new part of your business, like whatever that is, remembering that we totally underestimate our capacity for change. We all have the ability to transform these mental patterns, these beliefs, these feelings that we have about ourselves, about what's possible for us. And we have the capacity to create new pathways in our brain that allow us to do these things at an incredible level to some extent. I mean, some of the things for myself that I have, when I look back on them, I can't even believe I did them. Like, you know, when I ran the children's charity and I ran a music festival to raise money, and I would speak on stage in front of 200 people, and like, people would cheer, and I had these great speeches that I created, and like, I can't even imagine doing that now because that was so long ago. You know, that was way back in like 2008. So, you know, when we don't do something for a while too, we forget that we can do it. So life is really a process of continually just remembering that change is possible, that we can do new things, we can have what we want, but we have to be willing to get uncomfortable. Just like when I went and asked that random stranger to marry me in that frickin' store, and I remember it because it was horrible. Or another retreat where I had to dance in a tutu on stage in front of hundreds of people. That was so not my personality. If you know me at all, I hate costumes. I hate doing those sorts of things. I'm not like into being goofy in front of people. So yeah, so like we can do these things, but we just have to be, you and I, we just have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and feel free to remind me because I'm trying to do some uncomfortable things myself right now. That's it for today. Thanks.